My father begged me to save the family home from foreclosure, so I took out a crippling loan to help him. A week later, my sister posted photos from the Maldives, laughing about how I paid for it. They thought I was a fool, but I'm a financial analyst. I made one call to my bank and set a trap they never saw coming. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The phone call that ruined my life came on a Tuesday. I was already in a weakened state, curled up on my sofa under a weighted blanket, nursing the second migraine I'd had that month. The stress of my job as a senior financial analyst had been piling up, and the flickering numbers on my laptop screen seemed to be drilling directly into my skull. When my phone lit up with Dad, my first instinct was to ignore it. But a cold knot of dread, an old, familiar feeling, tightened in my stomach. My father, Robert, never called just to chat. I swiped to answer, wincing as I put the phone to my ear. "Hi, Dad, I'm not feeling." "Rachel, thank God." His voice was a ragged whisper, choked with a panic I hadn't heard since I was a child. "We're in trouble, real trouble." My migraine was instantly forgotten, replaced by a surge of adrenaline. "What is it? Is Mom okay?" "Your mother, Martha, she's beside herself. Rachel, we're going to lose the house." The words hit me like a physical blow. The house on Maple Drive was more than just bricks and mortar. It was the only home I had ever known. It was the backdrop to every childhood memory, every Christmas morning, every scraped knee. "Foreclosure," he choked out. "The bank, they're calling, we have 2 weeks." I sat bolt upright, the room spinning. "What? How? I thought you were managing the reverse mortgage payments. You said the retirement fund was fine." "A miscalculation," he said, the words sounding flimsy and thin. "The market, it took a dive, and I made a bad investment trying to catch up. It's all gone, honey, everything. We need $90,000. I don't know who else to turn to." $90,000. The amount echoed in the silent apartment. It was a staggering sum. It was my promotion bonus, my emergency fund, and a significant chunk of my own retirement savings combined. He was asking me to liquidate my future to patch up his past. For a moment, I couldn't breathe, but his next words broke me. "Your mother hasn't stopped crying. She keeps packing boxes and then unpacking them. I failed her, Rachel. I failed everyone." The image of my quiet, gentle mother, Martha, being forced out of her home, of her tending her rose bushes for the last time, it was more than I could bear. Don't do anything," I stammered, my analyst brain already running frantic calculations. "Let me see what I can do. I can't promise anything, Dad, but I'll look at my finances." "You're our only hope," he whispered, and the call ended. I spent the next 3 days in a financial hell of my own making. I couldn't liquidate my 401k without a catastrophic penalty. My savings weren't enough. The only option was a personal loan, a massive, high-interest loan that would chain me to my desk for the next decade, wiping out my dream of buying my own condo, of ever feeling financially secure. But the alternative, my parents homeless, in their 60s, was unthinkable. On Friday, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the loan application's approved status. The interest rate made me feel physically ill. I signed the papers electronically. The money, a life-altering $90,000, hit my account an hour later. I felt a profound sense of loss, a grieving for the future I had just sacrificed. My father had given me the wire details for his special escrow account with the bank. As a financial analyst, my fingers typed out of pure, ingrained habit. I added a binding memo to the wire transfer. For primary mortgage payoff, Act 44582B, 122 Maple Drive. It was a standard procedure for me, a way of earmarking large sums, a breadcrumb for the audit trail. I hit send. My father called me 2 hours later, weeping with gratitude. "You saved us, Rachel. You saved your mother. We'll pay you back every cent, I swear." I knew he wouldn't, he never had, but I told him it was okay. I told him to take care of Mom. I hung up and ate a bowl of instant ramen for dinner, the salty broth tasting like ash. The sacrifice was brutal, but it was done. My family was safe. The betrayal was worse than the loan itself. The week after the transfer was a blur of austerity. I immediately canceled my streaming services, my gym membership, and my weekly takeout treat. The first payment on the new loan was due in 3 weeks, and the number staring back at me from my budget spreadsheet was terrifying. Every line item had to be slashed. I was living on rice and beans, the bitter taste of self-sacrifice in every bite. I felt hollowed out, exhausted, but a small, stubborn part of me felt a grim satisfaction. I had done the right thing. I had stepped up when my family needed me. I tried calling my parents that weekend, wanting to hear that the foreclosure notice had been rescinded, that my mother was relieved, that the storm had passed. But my calls went to voicemail. "Hi, Dad, just checking in. Hope everything is settled with the bank. Love you. Hi, Mom, thinking of you. Call me when you get a chance." The silence was unusual. My mother, Martha, normally returned my calls within the hour. By Tuesday, a new kind of anxiety began to creep in, a cold unease that had nothing to do with my bank account. I told myself they were just busy, buried in paperwork, too embarrassed to talk to me after what I'd done. That evening, I was mindlessly scrolling through social media, a cheap distraction from the hunger pangs and the looming dread of my new financial reality. And then I saw it. My sister, Sarah, had posted a new photo. It wasn't a selfie from her apartment or a picture of her brunch. It was a professional-looking shot of her and her unemployed husband, David, clinking champagne glasses. Behind them, a stretch of impossible blue water met a blindingly white sand beach. An overwater bungalow with a private plunge pool was visible in the corner. The location tag was simple and devastating: Maldives. My heart stopped. It wasn't just a photo, it was an album. Sarah in a designer bikini, posing at the end of a dock. David holding up a lobster, grinning like a fool. A video of them laughing as they jumped into the private pool with a caption that read, "Living our best life. So blessed and grateful for this spontaneous getaway." I couldn't breathe. The Maldives. That was a $20,000 trip, minimum. Where had she gotten that kind of money? Sarah, who worked as an influencer, which meant she had 3,000 followers and got free face cream, and David, whose career was managing her non-existent brand, were chronically broke. They were the reason I had to guard my own finances so fiercely. I scrolled, my thumbs shaking. More photos, dinners on the beach, spa treatments. A thank you post tagging a 5-star resort I knew cost over $2,000 a night. My mind was scrambling, trying to make sense of it. A lottery win? A sudden inheritance I didn't know about. A new comment popped up from one of her oblivious friends. "OMG, Sarah, how did you swing this? Aren't you crazy in debt?" I watched, my blood turning to ice, as Sarah's reply appeared 3 seconds later. "Ha ha ha, we had a sudden windfall from the family. My big sis finally decided to share the wealth, winking face with tongue. I dropped my phone. It clattered to the hardwood floor. My wealth, the loan, the $90,000. It wasn't a miscalculation. It wasn't a foreclosure. It was a lie. A cold, cruel, and meticulously planned theft. My hand was shaking so badly I could barely dial my father's number. This time, he picked up on the first ring. "Rachel, how are you?" His voice was breezy, cheerful. The panic from last week was gone. "I just saw Sarah's photos," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "The Maldives." There was a pause, a tiny, fractional hesitation that confirmed everything. "Ah, yes, a last-minute trip. You know your sister, always so spontaneous." "Who paid for it, Dad?" "Oh, he stammered. "They've been saving up." "She said I did." The words hung in the air, cold and sharp. "She said I paid for it. Is that true, Dad? Did you give my loan, the money for the house, to Sarah?" "Now, Rachel, don't be dramatic," he said, his voice shifting from cheerful to defensive. "Your sister. She's been working so hard. She was so stressed, on the verge of a breakdown. She just needed a break. It was just a small part of it. A reward." A reward? I was standing now, pacing my tiny apartment. A reward? For what? For breathing? "I just took out a $90,000 loan to save your home, and you gave it to her for a vacation." "We're not losing the house, not really," he admitted, his voice small. "We were just a little behind," I exaggerated. "But Rachel, we're a family, we help each other. You have a good job, you can afford it. Sarah has nothing. It's only fair." Fair? The word detonated in my chest. I, who had worked 80-hour weeks. I, who had built my life from scratch with no help from them. I, who was now eating ramen noodles so my sister could sip champagne in the Maldives. "Rachel, are you there? Don't be selfish." Selfish? That was the final straw. The fog of shock evaporated, replaced by a clarity so cold and sharp it almost made me laugh. "You're right, Dad," I said, my voice suddenly calm, all emotion gone. "Family helps each other. I'm so glad we had this chat." I hung up before he could reply. My hands were perfectly steady now. They hadn't just stolen from me, they had committed fraud. And I, a senior financial analyst, knew exactly what to do about it. They had all forgotten one crucial thing, the wire memo. They had forgotten who I was. My history with my family was a long, painful ledger of one-sided transactions. I was the responsible one, the serious one, the one who had left our small town, gotten a degree, and built a career. Sarah was the charismatic one, the free spirit, the one who, at 32, was still finding herself. From the time we were children, my parents, especially my father, Robert, had cultivated this dynamic. I was expected to be self-sufficient. Sarah was expected to be. Well, just Sarah. I paid for my own college education with a patchwork of scholarships and student loans I was still paying off. The year I graduated, Sarah dropped out of community college, and my parents co-signed a lease on a luxury apartment for her in the city, so she could be near the opportunities. When I got my first job, I bought a 10-year-old used car. When Sarah wanted a new convertible for her 25th birthday, my father drained his savings to get it for her, arguing that she needs to project success to be successful. My mother, Martha, was a passive accomplice. A retired nurse, her entire personality was built around avoiding conflict. Her mantra was "just keep the peace, Rachel." This always translated to "just give in to your father and sister, Rachel." She was the gentle, smiling buffer who ensured the path of least resistance always led directly to me. But the real architect of my family's dysfunction was my father. Robert had been a moderately successful salesman, and he carried that manipulative charm into his home life. He saw my financial stability not as an achievement to be proud of, but as a resource to be tapped. He spoke of family as a collective, but his definition was communistic in the worst way. From each according to her ability, me, to each according to her need, Sarah. Sarah, for her part, had absorbed this lesson perfectly. She and her husband, David, had turned entitlement into an art form. David, who hadn't held a job in 5 years, acted as her manager, booking her non-existent influencer gigs and curating her brand. In reality, they spent their days in trendy cafes, charging everything to credit cards my father would inevitably pay off. Sarah's resentment of me was as deep as her dependency on me. She mocked my boring job, my cheap apartment, and my sad, single life. She framed my responsibility as a character flaw, a lack of imagination. To her, I wasn't a person, I was a utility. A walking, talking bank account that was stubbornly, unfairly closed. The foreclosure was, I now realized, the masterpiece of their collective delusion. It was the one crisis, the one sacred thing they knew I could not ignore. The family home, my childhood, my mother's security. It was the perfect emotional blackmail. My father must have known I wouldn't ask too many questions. He had weaponized my love for them, my sense of duty against me. And Sarah wasn't just an accomplice, she was the beneficiary. I pictured her laughing with David as my father told them the good news. Rachel is paying for it. I could hear her delighted shriek, the clink of their glasses as they toasted my stupidity. They weren't just taking a vacation, they were spitting in my face. They were celebrating their victory over the selfish sister who had finally been forced to share. The phone call with my father replayed in my head. Don't be selfish. You can afford it. It's only fair. The casual, practiced ease with which he had lied, manipulated, and then justified his theft was chilling. He truly believed he was in the right. He believed he had a right to my money, to my future, to the fruits of my labor, because I was his daughter and Sarah was his favorite. I had spent my entire life trying to earn his pride. I had excelled in school, built a demanding career, and been the rock of the family, all in the desperate, childish hope that one day he would look at me with the same blind, unconditional adoration he gave Sarah. That one phone call, the casual cheer in his voice as he defended her vacation, finally killed that hope. It was a cold, necessary death. He wasn't a misguided father. He was a con man, and my sister was his gleeful apprentice. They saw me as a mark, and they had finally, after all these years, pulled off the big score, or so they thought. I opened my laptop. The anger was gone, replaced by a glacial calm. I wasn't a daughter anymore. I was a financial analyst with a fraud case, and I had the documentation to prove it. The shift from victim to strategist was as clean as throwing a switch. The tears of betrayal dried, and the part of my brain I used for complex audits and forensic accounting took over. My family saw me as an emotional, dutiful daughter. They had forgot. And that I was, by trade, a hunter of financial discrepancies. My first call wasn't to a lawyer. It was to my bank, to the vice president of the wire fraud department, a man I knew professionally. "Rachel," he said, his voice warm, "what can I do for you? Not another bond yield projection, I hope." "No, Greg, this is personal," I said, my voice steady. "I'm calling to report a wire fraud." I laid it out for him, not as a family drama, but as a financial crime. On Friday, I wired $90,000 from my personal loan account for the express purpose of a mortgage payoff. I have the wire memo stating this intent. I have since received verbal confirmation from the recipient, my father, Robert, that the funds were not used for this purpose. In fact, a significant portion was immediately diverted to a third party, my sister, for a non-essential luxury purchase. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. Rachel, are you sure? Diverted is a strong word. This is family. This is wire fraud, Greg, I stated, my voice leaving no room for argument. The loan I took out was contingent on a gift letter I filed with my own bank, which I can provide, stating the funds were for a real estate purchase. The recipient knowingly misrepresented the need for the funds to obtain them, and then knowingly and willfully misapplied them. I have evidence, social media posts, to be exact, of the misappropriation. I need to initiate an immediate investigation and a clawback. Greg was silent for a long moment. The professional in him was taking over. A wire memo with specific intent? That's your smoking gun, Rachel. It's not just a note, it's a legal instruction. He violated the terms of the transfer. Yes, we can absolutely initiate a clawback. What does that entail? I asked, pulling up a new spreadsheet. We'll contact his bank immediately, Greg explained. We will flag the incoming transfer as fraudulent. They will freeze his account, all of his accounts with them, most likely pending a full investigation. He'll have to prove the funds were used as specified. When he can't, their fraud department will cooperate in returning the funds. This is not a simple oops, I changed my mind. This is a federal crime. Good, I said, the word like a chip of ice. Freeze everything. It gets better, Greg said, his voice grim. If he's already moved the money to your sister, her accounts will be frozen too, as she's the recipient of fraudulently obtained funds. If she's in the Maldives, well, I hope she paid in advance. A slow, cold smile spread across my face. She's posting photos of champagne on the beach. I doubt she's thinking about her credit card limit. This will be messy, Rachel, he warned. It's one thing to do this to a stranger. Are you prepared for the fallout? They were prepared for the fallout of me living in debt for 10 years, I replied. I'm prepared. After I hung up, I felt a strange, light-headed sense of power. They had pushed me too far, and I was pushing back with the full, impersonal weight of the financial system. But I wasn't done. The wire memo was my trap, but I needed more. I needed to understand the full scope of the lie. I pulled my father's bank statements, the ones he had sent me, tear-stained, to prove his distress. Last time, I had looked at them with the panicked eyes of a daughter. Now, I looked at them with the cold eyes of an analyst. It took me less than 10 minutes. The foreclosure notice was a doctored-up letter from a predatory lender, not his actual mortgage holder. The past due stamps were in a slightly different font. It was a clumsy, amateurish forgery, but the real story was in the statements. He was in financial trouble, but not because of a bad investment. He had 2 new high-interest loans. I checked the dates. One was from 6 months ago, the other was from 2 days after Sarah announced her influencer career. He wasn't saving the house. He was funding her delusion. He had been bleeding his own retirement dry to pay for her apartment, her car, her dinners, her husband's non-existent salary. The $90,000 wasn't to stop a foreclosure. It was to refill the well. It was to pay off the credit cards he'd maxed out for her so he could start the cycle all over again. The betrayal was deeper than I could have ever imagined. He hadn't just lied to me. He had sacrificed his own future, his and my mother's, on the altar of my sister. He had beggared himself for her, and when his own money ran out, he had come for mine without a second thought. I saved the doctored letter. I highlighted the loan statements. I cross-referenced them with Sarah's social media posts from the last 6 months, a new designer bag, a spontaneous weekend in Miami, a gifted, I now knew it wasn't, laptop. I built a case, a timeline of financial malfeasance that was ironclad. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Sarah, a picture of her feet in the sand. Thinking, oh, F you, wish you were here. But you're probably just working lol, rolling on the floor laughing. I looked at the text. I looked at the file of evidence on my screen. I typed back a single, cheerful reply. Looks amazing. Have a wonderful time. Can't wait to see you when you get back. We have so much to celebrate. The call came 3 days later. It was a Saturday morning. I was at my desk, sipping coffee and calmly reviewing the correspondence from my bank. The clawback was in progress. My father's accounts were frozen. I was waiting for the inevitable explosion. When the phone rang, it wasn't my father. It was my mother, Martha, and she was hysterical. "Rachel, what did you do? What did you do?" "Mom, what are you talking about?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. "The bank, Robert went to the bank and they won't give him any money. The cards are all declined. They said the account is frozen. They said the word fraud, Rachel, he thinks. He thinks someone stole his identity." I took a slow sip of coffee. "His identity wasn't stolen, Mom. I know what happened." What do you mean?" she whispered. "I mean the bank froze the account at my request," I said simply. "Because the $90,000 I transferred was obtained under false pretenses and used for a purpose other than the one specified." There was a choked sound, then silence. I could hear my father's voice booming in the background. "Who is it? Is it Rachel? Give me the phone." The phone fumbled, and then Robert's voice, no longer cheerful or manipulative, but filled with a cold, terrifying rage, blasted my ear. "You, what did you do to my account?" "I'd ask you the same question, Dad," I replied, my voice as calm as his was furious. "Except I already know the answer. There was no foreclosure, was there?" He sputtered, That's none of your business. It was a family matter. How dare you? You went to the bank. You're trying to ruin me." "You ruined yourself," I said, the ice in my voice matching his fire. "You lied to me. You faked a foreclosure notice, and it was a terrible forgery. By the way, the font was all wrong. You took my $90,000, money I took a loan for, and you gave it to Sarah for a vacation." "She needed it," he roared. "She's fragile, this life. It's hard on her. You're strong, Rachel, you can handle it. It's just money to you." "It's my future, Dad, the one I'm now paying interest on. But this isn't about the money anymore. It's about the fraud. You see, when I sent that wire, I put a memo on it. For primary mortgage payoff, 122 Maple Drive. You remember that? That memo is a legally binding instruction. When you took that money and gave it to Sarah, you didn't just break a promise. You violated the terms of the wire transfer. You committed fraud." The line went completely, utterly silent. The booming rage was gone. I had finally said the magic word. Not fairness or family or betrayal. Fraud. A word a salesman from his generation would understand. A word that had legal, life-ruining consequences. What does that mean?" he finally whispered, his voice shaking. "It means my bank is clawing the money back. It means your accounts are frozen until every cent is returned. It means, well, It means Sarah and David's vacation is about to come to a very abrupt end. What does Sarah have to do with this? He yelped. She's the recipient of stolen funds, Dad. Her accounts will be frozen, too. Every credit card you pay for, every bank account linked to yours. It's all locked. I hope she paid for her hotel return flight in advance. I heard a thud. I think he dropped the phone, or perhaps he sat down very, very heavily. My mother's voice came back, thin and reedy. Rachel, please, you can't do this. Her credit cards, they're maxed out. They're in the Maldives. How will they get home? How will they even eat? That, I said, my voice softening with a sudden, genuine pity for my mother, is a problem that Robert created. He's the one who needs to fix it. He can sell Sarah's convertible. He can get a job, but my money is coming back to me. You're tearing this family apart, she shrieked. No, Mom, I said, the last of my patience evaporating. You all tore it apart when you decided my life's work was your personal vacation fund. The bank is handling it now. I'm done. I hung up. I stared at my wall. I felt nothing, not triumph, not sadness, just the quiet, clean emptiness of a ledger being balanced. The first confrontation was over. The lies were exposed. But the real performance, the one that would break the spell for good, was yet to come. The investigation was moving forward, but Sarah and David were still out there, oblivious, posting selfies while their financial world crumbled beneath them. I knew with absolute certainty that when they got back, my parents would try to stage some kind of intervention to paint me as the villain. I would be ready. The next 5 days were a masterclass in desperation. The texts and voicemails started as frantic, pleading messages from my mother. Rachel, please call us. Your father is sick with worry. You've made a terrible mistake. Let's just talk about this. When I didn't reply, the tone shifted. My father, Robert, began leaving his own messages, no longer enraged, but full of his old, oily charm, the salesman persona dialed up to 100. Rachel, princess, I think there's been a huge misunderstanding. A simple accounting error. You know how bad I am with numbers. Let's go to the bank together, just you and me, and we'll straighten this out. This is all just. It's just a mistake, honey. Call your old dad. I saved every voicemail. Each one was a new piece of evidence for my bank's fraud department, a documented attempt to get me to stop the investigation. I forwarded them to Greg with a simple note, more for your file. But the real show was happening 8,000 miles away. Sarah's social media, which I watched with the detached interest of a scientist, went from triumphant to confused to utterly silent. Her last post was a picture of a cocktail with the caption, "Sunset Vibes," followed by a flurry of confused comments from her friends. Then, nothing, for 48 hours. I knew exactly what was happening. I imagined the scene at the five-star resort, the bill for the $2,000 a night bungalow, the spa treatments, the lobster dinners. I pictured Sarah, smiling, handing over one of the credit cards my father paid for. The polite but firm, "I'm sorry, ma'am, this card has been declined." Her laughing it off, "Oh, try this one." And the mounting panic as each card, the Amex, the Visa, the backup, came back declined. The call to David, her manager, who would find his own cards similarly useless. The humiliating realization that their accounts were not just empty, but frozen solid. Then would come the frantic, collect call to our parents, the shrieking, the disbelief. "What do you mean the accounts are frozen? Do something." And the cold, sickening dread as my father was forced to tell her the truth. It was Rachel. She called the bank, she's cut us off. The silence on her social media was the silence of a trapped animal. They were stranded in one of the most expensive places on Earth with no money, no credit, and no way home. On the sixth day, I received a call from an unknown international number. I let it go to voicemail. The message was from Sarah. Her voice was unrecognizable, not the mocking, bubbly influencer, but a high-pitched, sobbing wreck. Rachel, you have to help us. They're going to call the police. The hotel says we have to pay or they're keeping our passports. I don't have any money. Dad's accounts are frozen. This is your fault. You have to fix this. Call them, Rachel. Call the bank and tell them it was a mistake. Please, please. She was weeping, hysterical, terrified. The person who had laughed about my financial sacrifice was now begging me to save her. I listened to the message twice, then deleted it. The next day, my mother called. She sounded exhausted. "They're coming home," she said, her voice flat. We had to cash in our last retirement bonds. The penalties, it wiped out almost everything, just to pay their hotel bill and get them flights." So there it was. In his desperation to save his favorite, Robert had finalized his own financial ruin, liquidating the last bit of real money they had. Not to pay the mortgage, but to rescue Sarah from a mess he had created. "They land tomorrow," my mother said. "We're having a family dinner to talk, 7 o'clock. You will be here, Rachel. We need to fix this, as a family." It wasn't a request, it was a summons. This was it. The final, desperate attempt to circle the wagons, to emotionally blackmail me into submission, to make me the bad guy so they could all feel better. "I'll be there," I said, my voice bright. "I'll even bring dessert." I spent the rest of the day preparing. I didn't bake. I printed. I printed the forged foreclosure letter. I printed the bank statements showing the loans for Sarah. I printed the wire transfer receipt with my highlighted memo. I printed the timeline of her social media posts cross-referenced with my father's bank withdrawals. I printed the gift letter he had signed for my loan, the one stating the money was for the house. I put it all in a neat, professional-looking portfolio. My case was irrefutable. The spell wasn't just broken, I was about to shatter it into a million pieces. I walked into my childhood home feeling like a stranger. The air was thick with a toxic, unspoken tension. My mother, Martha, was bustling in the kitchen, her movements jerky and anxious, avoiding my eyes. My father, Robert, was sitting in his armchair, looking 10 years older. His face was a grayish pale, his usual salesman's twinkle replaced by a dull, terrified stare. He couldn't meet my gaze. And then there was Sarah and David. They were sitting on the sofa, looking diminished. Sarah's Maldives tan was already fading, and her eyes were red and puffy from crying. She was wearing sweatpants, her influencer glamour completely gone. David just stared at the floor, his leg bouncing nervously. The conquering heroes had returned, not in glory, but in absolute disgrace. I placed the bakery box with the apple pie on the counter. "Hello, everyone," I said, my voice echoing in the silence. My mother rushed over. "Oh, Rachel, thank you for coming. It's almost ready." "Let's just get to it," Sarah snapped, her voice raspy. She stood up, her eyes blazing with a weak, residual fury. "Let's hear it. Are you happy now, Rachel? Are you happy you ruined us?" I turned to her, my expression one of mild curiosity. "Ruined you? I'm not sure what you mean. I thought you just got back from a luxury vacation. I saw the photos. It looked incredible." "Don't you play dumb," David chimed in, finding a sliver of courage. You froze our accounts, you stranded us." "I didn't freeze your accounts, David," I said simply. I have no control over your finances since you don't appear to have any. I reported a fraudulent wire transfer. My bank, in turn, froze the account the money was sent to, Dad's account. The fact that your entire lifestyle is funded by him. Well, that's your problem, not mine. Rachel, please, my father interjected, his voice pleading. We made a mistake. A terrible mistake. But you can't. You're destroying this family. Just call the bank. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. We'll pay you back. I'll get a job, I swear. I laughed. It wasn't a nice laugh. A job? You'll pay me back? Don't lie, Dad. You're not just bad with money, you're a thief. You witch, Sarah shrieked, lunging at me. David pulled her back. You were always jealous. Always. You had all this money and you never shared. You never helped. Help, I said, my voice rising, the cold calm finally cracking to reveal the white-hot anger beneath. I've been helping this family my entire life. I helped by getting scholarships so you wouldn't have to pay for my college. I helped by moving out and supporting myself at 22 so you could pour all your money into her. I pointed at Sarah. She's 32 years old, Dad. She has no job, no skills, and no income. Her husband is a parasite. And you've bled yourself dry for her. And when your money ran out, you came for mine. I opened my portfolio. I threw the first paper on the coffee table, the forged foreclosure letter. You helped me by faking this, didn't you, Dad? Robert flinched as if I'd slapped him. My mother gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Robert, what? What is that? He told me you were going to be homeless, I said to her. He sent me this, crying, but it's a fake. I'm a financial analyst. Did you really think I wouldn't spot a bad forgery? I threw down the next set of papers. These are your bank statements, the real ones, the ones that show the high-interest loans you took out, not for the mortgage, but to pay for Sarah's car, for her apartment, for her career. You weren't saving the house, Dad. You were just refilling her allowance. Sarah's face had gone from red to a sickly white. She was staring at her father. Dad, is that true? And then, I said, my voice dropping, there's this. I placed the final single sheet on the table, the wire transfer receipt, my $90,000 and my memo for primary mortgage payoff. And this. I added the signed gift letter on top of it. A legal document you signed for my loan provider attesting that the money was for the house. You didn't just lie to me, Dad. You lied to my bank. You committed wire fraud. Robert made a small, choking sound. He looked at the papers, and the last bit of fight went out of him. He visibly deflated, shrinking into his armchair. This isn't my fault. Sarah suddenly screamed, her voice high and desperate. She was looking at her father, her eyes wide with a terrifying, dawning realization. You told me the money was from an investment. You said Rachel wanted to help. You told me to go. Robert stammered, looking at his favorite daughter. I wanted you to be happy, Princess. Happy, she shrieked, and the sound was raw. Happy? I was humiliated. I had to beg them not to call the police. We're in thousands of dollars of debt from the emergency flight. They're going to sue us. You did this to me. In that moment, the spell wasn't just broken, it was annihilated. Sarah, the pampered princess, finally saw her father not as an enabler, but as the architect of her humiliation. Her loyalty, which was only ever built on what he could give her, evaporated in an instant. I hate you, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. I hate you, she grabbed David's hand. Get me out of here. Get me away from him. She ran from the room, sobbing, and a moment later, the front door slammed shut. My father just sat there, a broken old man, staring at the evidence of his crimes. My mother was weeping silently into her hands. I looked at them, at the ruins of the family I had tried so hard to save. "My bank's fraud department will be in touch, Dad," I said quietly, picking up my portfolio. "They've already clawed back $70,000 from your accounts. They'll be coming for the other 20. I'd suggest you find a way to get it." "Rachel," my mother whispered, your pie." I looked at the apple pie on the counter, a symbol of a life that was now over. "I've lost my appetite, Mom." I walked out the front door and didn't look back. The downfall was not a single dramatic event, but a slow, systematic collapse. My bank, armed with my ironclad evidence, pursued the case with impersonal efficiency. The frozen funds were returned to my loan account, covering the bulk of the principal. My father, Robert, was forced to liquidate the last of his and my mother's assets. The retirement bonds he'd used to fly Sarah home were just the beginning. He had to sell his car and, in the ultimate irony, take out a second mortgage. A real one, this time, on the very house he'd pretended to be saving. He had to do this to pay back the remaining $20,000 to my bank, as the alternative was a federal fraud investigation. My father's relationship with Sarah was shattered. Her narcissistic rage, once unleashed, could not be contained. She blamed him for everything: her debt, her humiliation, her trauma. She and David moved out of their trendy apartment, which they were evicted from for non-payment, and moved in with David's long-suffering parents, where they were reportedly sleeping on a pull-out sofa in the basement. Sarah's influencer career vanished overnight. Her social media went dark, and I heard through a cousin that she was working as a hostess at a chain restaurant, a fate she probably considered worse than death. My mother, Martha, was the silent victim in all this. She was trapped in a house she now truly was at risk of losing, with a broken, bitter husband who had gambled away their future. She called me once, a few months later. Her voice was small. I'm just calling to see how you are." "I'm fine, Mom," I said, and for the first time it was true. "Your father, he misses you," she lied. "No, he doesn't," I said, not unkindly. "He misses my bank account. How are you, Mom?" There was a long, rattling sigh. "It's quiet. Robert doesn't talk much anymore, and Sarah, she doesn't call." She paused. "You were right, Rachel. I should have said something. All those years, I'm so sorry." "I know, Mom," I said. It was the most honest thing she had ever said to me. The apology was 20 years too late, but it was something. "You have my number. If you ever need anything, you can call me." It was an oar I was extending only to her. I didn't know if she would ever have the strength to take it. As for me, the weight of that loan was still on my shoulders, but it felt different. It was no longer a monument to their betrayal. It was the cost of my freedom. I doubled down at work. My focus, now undivided by family drama, was razor sharp. I took on new projects, led a major merger analysis, and 6 months later, I received a promotion and a bonus that covered nearly half of what was left on the loan. I was working late the day the final bank notice came. The case was closed. The funds were fully recovered. I was still in debt, but I was in control. I looked out my office window at the city lights and I felt at peace. I had lost a family, but I had gained myself. I had saved the only person I was ever truly responsible for me. I deleted their numbers from my phone, one by one, and went home to my quiet apartment, which, for the first time, felt completely and totally my own.